I think we can all agree that snobs are the worst. When it comes to wine, basically every study ever conducted has concluded that it's ridiculously easy to convince even the top sommeliers that $5 boxed white wine is the finest red wine ever bottled. It's also not because wines they would happily sacrifice their firstborn to have a glass of and would otherwise have raved about when told it contains some cheap wine are more than likely to claim that it tastes like horse piss. No, the fact that human psychology is so big a part of the whole wine mythos and how we perceive tastes and smells, that's not actually our big problem here. Humans are gonna human after all, and everybody likes what they like, with human psychology often playing a big role in that, and so really, who are we to judge? No. The real problem is a rather vocal subset of wine connoisseurs who are astoundingly snooty about the whole thing, making all of the rest of us wine lovers look bad in the process. This level of snobbishness is particularly rich given that some of them have spent thousands of hours of their precious time on Earth doing nothing more than becoming an expert on grape juice. You know, the stuff that, without alcohol, your 2-year-old drinks at $3 a gallon. The reality is you might as well go and get highfalutin about your fuzzy sock collection, which, to be fair, is absolutely fabulously comfy, I'm quite sure. Perhaps nothing sums all of this up better than the so-called Judgment of Paris, an event that would change the wine world forever and for the better. Besides the more productive outcomes, the event saw some of the top pearl-clutching French wine snobs throw a near year-long temper tantrum because they accidentally revealed that in a blind taste test that they not only largely misidentified the American wine from the supposedly far superior French wine, but they strongly preferred the American adult grape juice. The origins of the Judgment of Paris, they can be traced to a well-meaning promoter of French wine and an owner of a wine store in Paris called Steven Spurrier. Spurrier organized the event with hopes of highlighting that the quality of wine coming from California at the time wasn't nearly as bad as its reputation then held. He also hoped in the process to drum up some additional business for his Parisian wine shop in highlighting the many French wines that could be purchased there. Naturally, he, along with pretty much everyone else in the world, assumed the French wines would win this contest pretty handily. In organizing the event, Spurrier scouted what he felt were the finest wines currently produced in California and pitted them deathmatch style against their closest French equivalent. To judge the competition, Spurrier tracked down some of France's top wine experts, including the then editor of the French Wine Review, Odette Kahn, as well as several professional sommeliers, the elite of wine tasters, and they were all of the French persuasion. All in all, Spurrier was able to assemble a veritable dream team of wine-sniffing talent consisting of 9 of the best palates in the business. To round out the numbers, Spurrier himself took part, as did American wine connoisseur Patricia Gallagher. Realizing that accusations of bias would inevitably be levied against him if French wines cleaned house at the event, Spurrier opted to make the event a blind tasting and told his fellow judges to simply judge each wine on its own merits, not by any specific scale. This was something that his judges had no problem with at first. Although Spurrier attempted to publicize the competition as widely as he could, sending invites to almost every major media outlet that he could think of, the whole thing was seen as being such a non-story that only a single journalist showed up to cover the event. That was Time magazine's George M. Tabor. Tabor would later state that he only showed up as a favor to Spurrier and, like almost everyone else, assumed the French wines would win hands down, which would likely see his article have about as much interest as one titled "Water is Wet." Tabor, who unlike the judges knew which wines were which ahead of time, quickly changed his mind though when he saw French restaurateur and chef Raymond Oliver say to himself, back to France, while sampling a Napa Valley Chardonnay. As Tabor would later recount in an interview with NPR, I thought, hey, maybe I've got a story here. And oh man, did he have a story. The subsequent piece that he wrote has been called the most significant news story ever written about wine. Why? Well, almost every judge placed at least one American wine above its French counterpart, while several, including a later mortified Kahn, deemed an American wine, both red and white, to be the best overall. In fact, the American wines as a group absolutely dominated 1992 Olympic basketball dream team style. While this might seem like a non-story today, it's important to understand the context here. Again, at this point in history, it was generally assumed by pretty much every wine expert that French wine was vastly superior to all other wines in the world for a variety of reasons, including things like soil, weather, and secret methods passed down through the centuries that were only known to French winemakers. As Tabor would later comment on the results, it turned out to be the most important event because it broke the myth that only in France could you make great wine. It opened the door for this phenomenon today of the globalization of wine. Wine expert and author David White further chimed in, stating, "The 1976 judgment totally changed the game. The results gave winemakers everywhere a reason to believe that they too could take on the greatest wines in the world." Not long after this event, the creation of new wine vineyards across the world absolutely exploded. On top of this, according to the founder of the award-winning wine brand Stag's Leap, Warren Winarski, winemakers also began more openly sharing information about their methods with others in the field. What all this revealed was that the French winemakers had been falling well behind the times in a lot of areas, owing to keeping to various traditions and classical ways of doing things, whereas newer vineyard owners had been more open to embracing improved methods and technologies. Thus, thanks to this event, Winarski states, "The wines of the world are better, the wines of France are better." Alright, let's get back to the judgment of Paris. Upon hearing the results, a furious Odette Khan tried and failed to get her ballot back, reportedly desperate to stop anyone from finding out how she'd ranked the wines, fearing that it would ruin her considerable reputation in the wine world. When her efforts failed, she resorted to slandering Spurrier and claiming that the event, judged near exclusively by French wine experts in France, put on by a guy at the time who only sold and spent his life championing French wine, had been rigged against French wine. Khan and others also saw to it that Spurrier was temporarily ostracized from the French wine community, initially making it difficult for him to stock the shelves of his wine shop, as well as banning him from the prestigious French wine tasting tour for a year. Even after that year, he found himself occasionally having trouble acquiring certain wines, such as finding himself banned from the De Mont Ramonnet Prud'hon vineyard when he went there to make a purchase over a year later. Not all was lost for Spurrier, however. He would later go on to win a variety of awards in the wine industry, including one for, ironically, his services to French wine. But before all this, the French media responded by effectively burying the story of the judgment of Paris. In fact, among the scant mentions of it in French papers from the time, some questioned whether the event had actually even happened. One that did acknowledge it simply argued that the experiment was merely an example of the silliness that can occur at blind tastings, which, to be fair, well, it's a valid point, though the overarching result of the event still stood. While exact results may vary from test to test, French wines weren't in a class of their own anymore. That said, 30 years later, Spurrier organized yet another blind tasting, very much like the first, to see if the results would change, but again, this resulted in American wines winning top honors. This time, however, seemingly nobody was greatly surprised nor upset. Turns out you can make great wine in a variety of regions in the world, and not just in France. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do give us a thumbs up below. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment, let us know how we're doing, all of that good stuff. If you want more videos from me, why not subscribe to my other channel called Top 10s? You'll find a link to that below. And as always, thank you for watching.